back, everyone, to the Punk Rock Horror Podcast. I'm Matt.
I'm Cody.
And today we're joined by the amazing Angela from Terror at 5280.
Hello.
Thank you, Angela. Why don't you introduce yourself? Why are you here today?
So I'm Angela Sylvain, and I'm a horror author here locally. So super excited to be on the podcast to promote Terror at 5280, which is a collection of 22 dark tales that takes place along the Front Range in Colorado and in the Denver area. And it's completely written by local authors because we've got a ton of horror talent in the Denver area.
Perfect.
Cool.
So, Terror 5280, I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory, 5280 being our elevation for the most part.
No way.
Oh, smart.
So, what I thought was really interesting about kind of collabing and bringing you guys on, and at least bringing you on, is that there is a lot of horror creators here in Denver.
Yes.
I mean, we partner with a lot of them. Erin McGarry is a big, huge friend of ours, and she works on the show as well. And, you know, she's been a part of a lot of horror collectives too. And so it's really exciting to see a book, a collaboration. So what is everything in this book about? You know, what kind of stories are we looking at?
Yeah. So there's definitely a wide variety of stories, types of horror, which is one of the things I love about horror is that there can be so much variety. So there's paranormal stories, more psychological stories, but the thing that ties them all together is they all take place in locations around the Denver or the Front Range that are either creepy or maybe have some kind of folklore attached to it, just to give it kind of a spooky effect and make it really local as far as where it takes place.
Okay.
Cool.
And my story takes place at Lakeside Amusement Park and the abandoned Lakeside Speedway because, like, amusement parks, so creepy, right?
Yeah.
So I was immediately like, yes, that's what I want to do. And so a lot of stories like that. So there's a variety of places they take place. Mine happens to be at the amusement park.
So
That's awesome. It's funny because when I was a little kid, I used to go to Lakeside every year for my birthday.
Uh-huh.
My dad actually used to tell me that he felt safer leaving it, like, you know, not leaving us there, but like letting us run around and be kids at Lakeside a little more than Elitch is. So it's like,
Yeah.
and yet there's all the, you know, scary lore and all the spookiness there.
It's very much like an old school amusement park.
Oh, yeah.
Like wooden coasters. It doesn't have the like
woodchuck.
bright shine of an Elitch's, I think. So
Or
it's a lot
chipmunk.
more spooky and
yeah.
what I
Wild
think of
chipmunk.
from when I was a kid.
Yeah, Lakeside is definitely like what you would imagine in, you know, scary stories to tell in the dark. If somebody would
Exactly.
describe what a amusement park looks like in that version, it's definitely Lakeside.
Especially the mirror maze in there.
Yes,
Oh my
so
god, I used to
creepy.
hate that maze so much.
That place is filled with bacteria.
That it
I'm
is.
sure.
It's just all the
So
sludges.
disgusting.
What is that?
That is the real terror.
that smegma?
At 5280 is the mirror maze at Lakeside.
Is that smegma? Don't touch
So yeah, do a lot of these stories focus on places in here in Denver, or is it just kind of like this mix and match of a lot of creative souls?
Yep, all are places in and around Denver area, but it's a wide variety. So one might be a cemetery. There's a story focused around the Lafayette vampire, which is a legend that is around Lafayette, and that story takes place in a cemetery. There's another story that takes place in a local coffee shop. There's another one that's on the side of the road driving up into the mountains, and what can happen when you get stranded, and maybe the person that stops to help you isn't the person you'd want to stop and help you.
Right.
So it's a wide variety of locations and types of stories.
So I know we kind of touched a little bit on some of like the mythical folklore in Lakeside, but does a lot of Colorado urban legend influence a lot of these stories?
Yeah, I think a lot of the authors were inspired by that.
Yeah.
When the book was put together, it was an open submission. So as a writer, we look for areas that want stories, and then I would typically write a story to like fit that call. And so the authors that submitted to this all wrote the stories to try and fit the call for this book, which means they looked for local places and legends that like resonated with them and something that could spark that idea for a really cool story. And one of the things that I integrated into mine was not just Lakeside Amusement Park, but next door to Lakeside Amusement Park, there's a speedway that's abandoned, and it's super creepy. You can actually find drone footage on the internet.
And it's not Bandamere, is it?
No, it's not Bandamere. It's a totally old school speedway that has like trees growing out of the asphalt and old rusted cars that are still there. It's never been cleaned up.
Yeah.
And it's super cool and spooky. But the reason why it closed is there was a very serious accident where a car actually went off the tracks and crashed through the chain link fence and went into the stands and killed someone.
Oh, wow.
So that was kind of another thing that I used in my story. That's it's not really local folklore, but it's an actual event that happened that resulted in the closing of the speedway.
I gotta wonder if that inspired that death scene in Final Destination.
Oh, maybe.
At that racetrack, where like that dude gets his head taken off with the tire.
I don't know. I also feel like that's just like someone who used to watch a lot of NASCAR just hoping one day. And they're like, you know what? Fuck it. I'm just going to put it in a movie.
Like that was the real method behind, like the real motivation behind all the Final
director was
Destinations.
just like, fuck it. I just want
cool
that one
visual.
scene in the movie.
Like all the other movies just paid for that scene.
That one
Like he just
scene.
wanted that scene to happen.
And the worst Final Destination movie ever.
I don't know. I thought they had pretty creative deaths. They were really stupid. I
Just
fully.
right out the butt.
Yeah, I know.
Come
Then
on.
through the pool.
Anything else? Anything else?
It's,
I kind of like that movie too, I have to admit.
it's a guilty pleasure. It definitely is.
It is.
So can you touch a bit more about your story and what it's about
Yeah,
without giving too much
absolutely.
away?
So my story is about a teenage girl. Her name is Claire, and she is very controlled in her life. So her mother controls everything she's allowed to do, and she really doesn't have a lot of freedom. But once a year, she's allowed to do whatever she wants to do on her birthday, and she chooses to go to Lakeside Speedway because they have roller coasters, and that's where she gets her taste of like freedom and danger, and she actually gets to kind of live her own life and be a little free. But on her 16th birthday, she meets a girl at the amusement park, Mia, who I would say is kind of like a siren, who's just tempting her with all the things she doesn't have in her life, and taking her from kind of the happiness and laughter and joy of the amusement park to the abandoned Lakeside Speedway. And, you know, horror ensues.
Ooh.
So,
So it's definitely not in like what we would expect of like a Nancy Drew-esque type of like
Right.
the thriller type of thing. This is
Right.
definitely for more mature readers.
There's,
yeah, I mean, it's not too gory, but it's, so it's probably suitable for most, but definitely spooky. You gotta have an appetite for horror.
Absolutely.
And it does not have a happy ending, so
Ooh.
gotta be okay with that.
I'm happy with that because I honestly love stories that don't have happy endings all the time. That's what I've been saying the entire podcast. I'm like, honestly, especially when it comes to ghost stories, a happy ending like generally shouldn't happen. Like, and
Yeah.
I think that makes it a lot better.
Well, and I think that's one of the cool things about horror as a genre, is it's one of the few genres where you can get away with not having a happy ending, and your audience kind of expects that, and they're good with it. So you can go pretty dark and different from other kinds of stories.
Yeah.
What do you think justifies as a good like ending for it being a bad ending? So I guess to be more specific, what I mean is I know a lot of times in horror movies, shorts, even some stories, they definitely go for an unhappy ending in order to try to sell the whole story. But
Yeah.
sometimes it's a complete out of left field ending that doesn't really fit. So what do you think would justify a good unhappy ending? And how do you really approach that?
And even happy endings, I think, in horror, you know, I think of like the final girls, right? You've
Yeah.
got a girl who, in the end, they're like the only one who lives. That's not really a happy ending. It's like one person triumphs, and in a way, they
Yeah.
they win.
All
but
the
it's not
friends are still
she's
dead.
gonna have so much therapy after
right.
that.
Like they're not going to be okay.
That's probably
you
why
know?
they always make her friends terrible people.
Right.
So that way you don't have to
You don't
question.
feel so bad.
Yeah, they're like, oh, all your
Hey,
friends are dead,
see,
but at
I
least
know
they're
I
monsters.
was like,
Yeah.
see, that's why I actually really like Halloween 2, Rob Zombie's Halloween 2, because he shows what would actually happen if you were hunted down by a mass serial killer that slaughtered all your friends.
Yep.
You're not going to go, all right, I'm going to go meet Timmy down the block and get married. It's more of like, I'm going to go to the psych ward because I can't handle the fact I saw my friends inside.
Exactly.
And I
Yeah.
just shot the serial killer in the face.
There can be some victory.
Yeah, it's like,
Yeah.
hey, I'm not being hunted except
yeah.
by my nightmares.
Exactly. But I think there's a lot of variety in horror endings, certainly.
Okay.
But an unhappy ending, I think, would be sort of when the person you're rooting for doesn't win, I guess, is how I think of it.
Yeah.
You don't have that to hold on to at the end.
Well, and it probably fits well with horror at most part because, you know, when we watch action movies, when we watch
Yeah.
anything that's outside of the realm of horror for the most part even is just we're expected them to survive. I mean, even with hero movies, like we obviously want, you know, Iron Man and Captain America
Yeah.
to win, but there's this kind of this weird narrative and motivation that we want our hero in horror to suffer. Like we want her to walk, or him, or her, in this case her, walk away with scars.
Yep.
Why do you think that we seek that so much?
Well, I think
Feel my pain.
it's kind of like a safe zone, right? Like there's a lot of pain in the world, and we have to have an outlet for it and a way to kind of think about it and figure out how to deal with it. And a lot of times in the real world, the pain, like, for example, when we were chatting a little bit earlier about potentially going to war.
Oh yeah.
It's stressful to think about that, right?
Yeah.
But you can lose yourself in a fantasy world where the horrors are fake, but it's still kind of teaching you how to deal with really scary things.
Yeah.
And I think it can actually help you in life too. That's actually why I think middle grade and young adult horror are so cool, because it teaches kids kind of how to handle these concepts that can be overwhelming and scary, but in a safe environment that isn't actually a threat to them. And I think that actually does carry through to real life, right? You now you've built up your metal a little bit.
It's like it's because we want to relate. We want heroes we can relate to, and we're comic geeks, so obviously we love our Batman, we love our Thor and everything, but we also
he's
like.
All right.
he's a little dumb. But I think when it comes to heroes in horror, they usually come from a relatable background, something that we can relate to. You always see them kind of put in a spotlight where it's like they either do have a controlling parent, or they come from an abused background or something that has to be morbid, because we can relate to those, because those are the type of people that we converse with on a day-to-day basis. And so kind of bringing it back to Terror at 5280, what was the whole inspiration to do a horror book, especially in Denver? I mean, did what I say kind of influence that, or was there more to this, to creating this whole book?
Yeah, I think the big driving force, honestly, was the Denver Horror Collective. It's a really powerful group of people in Denver that I only recently joined. But they've been meeting for a while and had this idea that they wanted to showcase local artists and writers. And just made it happen. So it's just a lot of talent, and luckily we also have a big talent pool to pull from in the area. We, like you said, we do have a lot of really talented artists and writers in Colorado, and so they were just inspired to try and create something and put it out there that represents Denver really well. And by the way, if people want more information about it, denverhorror.com is where the Denver Horror Collective page is. And you can get information about the book and also just about the collective itself. But yeah, it's just a really cool group of people, and I think there's a lot of visibility coming to Colorado and our horror community. We have the first Colorado Festival of Horror coming up next, or later this year, which
we're
is
really hoping to get on
cool.
that.
Yeah, seriously.
And then in 2021, StokerCon is going to be here, which is like the premier horror con. And so that's huge. That's like a really big get for Denver. But I think it just shows we're starting to kind of put ourselves in Colorado on the map a little bit.
Yeah. Well, I think that what worked so well with the Punk Rock Horror Podcast and with Terror at 5280 and just all the horror creators here in Denver and what we're talking about is that we kind of, I feel, and maybe whether it's the fate or universe or even, Bela Lugosi from the grave helping us, I feel like we kind of all went to this renaissance where everybody in the horror community is now getting serious about what they're doing and making strides. So coming back to what you're saying, with the Denver Horror Collective and COFO coming up, and then even our podcast becoming more known in Denver too, there's kind of this overwhelming feeling. I mean, it's now we're in this position where we're looked to guide and to kind of, help connect each other. Do you get a lot of that overwhelming feeling, or how do you approach it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think the horror community, and I know mostly about the writing community, but I think this applies more globally as well, is so supportive of each other and our successes. I'm a member of the Horror Writers Association. Their president wrote the foreword for the book.
Okay.
And, he's an important guy that, took the time to do that and to support our local efforts.
If you want, you can give him a shout out.
John Pellisano wrote the foreword to the book.
Yeah.
And, I have a mentor at the HWA that helps me kind of improve my skills as a writer. And I think we all just do a really great job supporting each other and kind of growing the genre and getting more recognition for it. And even just in the writing side of things, helping people realize that it's not just all, though I love him, it's not just all Stephen King.
Yeah.
And like Joe Hill and Dean Koontz.
Yeah.
There's so much horror talent out there, especially for women too. There's a big movement to push women in horror. And Ladies of Horror Fiction is awesome in promoting women in horror and kind of feminist horror. So it's just a really cool time. It's almost like a renaissance, I think, for horror creatives. And there's a big appetite for it.
And,
especially just with I feel like the quality of horror movies coming out in the theaters and everything has kind of been like a really big push for it. And then not just that, like the amount of I wouldn't say quality, but some fairly decent horror shows coming out and everything. Yeah. Like there's been a mass amount, but not all of them have been that good. Yeah. But there's been some.
Well,
really,
no, you're right, because we've even I'm sorry.
There's just with everything coming out on the mass media, I feel like a lot of people are starting to feel more comfortable coming out with their own stories and everything, or they want to do their own media content around horror. And I think that's awesome, because the same thing happened with the superhero boom. Yep. Like when the MCU first started coming up, that's when YouTube was just filled with comic content, top 10 superheroes about this, blah blah blah, and learn the history of all these heroes in the MCU. I feel like that's coming up for horror now, and I think it's great.
Absolutely.
I agree with that too. Yeah. And I'm glad you also brought up women in horror too, because I was actually going to ask you about this as well. So one of our first episodes we did is we talked about female leads in horror, mostly horror movies, obviously. And we made the point that a lot of our favorite movies had a female lead and had strong females in them. I mean, probably the most notable is obviously Halloween, and then, Aliens, everybody knows that one. And even Nightmare on Elm Street, all of them end with a strong female lead. And so we made this argument that in horror, there's this potential, not even this potential, but this area for women to have a strong character that they can resonate with.
Yeah,
I mean, my favorite movie, is Evil Dead, and it's the one male lead it has, but looking at it, in a broad way, even when they came out with the satirical movie Feast, they even had women in the forefront, looking out for themselves and fighting for themselves. So coming back to this, how do you feel about that with women in horror? Do you think that this is the right medium for them to stretch out? And if so, what is the right direction for it to go, do you think?
Yeah, I absolutely think it's an awesome medium. I think, just like any group of people, women have a unique perspective on their life experience. Women can write some really cool, what we call body horror. Women have certain things they go through with their bodies that are different, right? Yeah. And that's going to inspire different kind of horror writing.
Like David Lynch body horror, or
somewhat, but even when you think about things like having babies and puberty and just different stuff like that. There's blood involved. You know what I mean? Women have a unique perspective on some stuff that can make for some pretty scary stories. Yeah. And offer an interesting perspective. And I think the other side of it is with the kind of rising up of a lot of the feminist movement more recently related to kind of world events and women feeling like they need to have a voice. I think horror is a great outlet. And women characters don't just have to be the heroine anymore. They can be the villain. They can be every kind of character. Which is a lot more fun, actually. You don't always have to be the final girl. Maybe you're now the axe murderer who's trying to kill everyone else.
Well, and you're right with that.
Very cool.
I mean, even Kathy Bates in Misery is a great example of that too. She's the villain of that entire movie, and it's the first time I was ever terrified of Kathy Bates.
I've always been terrified of Kathy Bates.
She definitely has a look at her. She'd curb stomp someone.
She'd punch me in the face.
That's how she got her rise in Hollywood, was via curb stomping her way up.
I think especially with having the female villains and everything, now is so much better. I feel like, especially because my favorite fucking movie, High Tension, you know,
He doesn't
where
like
they
that
do
movie.
it wrong, they do the twist wrong, and they do the female villain wrong. It's I will never stop shitting on that movie. God, fuck, it's such a disappointment.
It's definitely one of the roughest ways to like portray schizophrenia.
So
ever.
like, not only just schizophrenia, but like you have this, they make you like believe in this strong female-led, you know, heroine, and then it also tries to put like sprinkle in a little bit of LGBTQ, you know, TQ. I said D, but I meant T. TQ, like with her actually being in love with her best friend, and that's why she's trying to save her best friend, and then just like comes out of nowhere with a stupid ass twist. It's like, she's actually the villain. It's like, that's not how you portray that shit. That's not how you do the twist. And that's not how you portray a strong female villain or anything. I was like, that was terrible. And then you have The Babysitter, which I feel like did it so much better.
I loved The Babysitter.
So
and I know
good.
you guys both love Samara Weaving.
Podcast. She's
She
I love
is
Samara.
just amazing.
I feel like I'm pretty positive she's done more than just horror, but I feel like every role I've seen her in a horror movie, it's just been phenomenal.
Yep.
Mayhem was great. Ready or Not was great.
God, I love Ready or Not.
Ready or Not was really good. I'm really kind of depressed that last year that was the one that didn't get as much attention, especially with Knives. When
Ready or Not, Crawl didn't get that much attention either. Like,
and that was a Sam Raimi film.
Any horror movies that came out at the beginning of the year didn't really get any attention. It was all about it.
Yeah, and
even the king overshadows.
Yeah,
I mean, we love him, but
well, yeah, but like there was so much more unique horror that came out. Like, when was the last time we had a good creature feature, and also a female-led movie where like it was unique. She was a swimmer, like that was unique. The other thing about Crawl was unique. Yeah. That's what I was talking about. And then we have our female-led villain with The Babysitter. How unique was that? Where like, you know, the one that you expect to either be the first one to die off in like a horror movie, or the final girl turns out to be the ringleader. It was awesome.
What I love about Samara Weaving is that she's always played a role that's kind of like gone against what you would expect a cliche casting of her type of girl would be casted for. And case in point is the movie Mayhem. And we're going to come back to Terror 5280, I promise.
No, that's okay. I love these movies.
But Mayhem, I don't want to give it all away, but there's a scene in that movie where she's kind of held captive, and she's, pacing back and forth with headphones in her ears, and I think it's Black Dahlia Murder, but I'm not sure what's playing in her head. It's basically just like,
death metal.
Metal, and between her and her co-star at the time, who was asking, I can't believe you're like listening to that kind of, judgment. She's like, what did you think I would listen to? Some poppy bullshit. I just love that because
no, she doesn't have to listen to that. She doesn't have to be a fan.
You don't.
John Denver or whatever it is.
John Denver.
Well, I was going to say, the nice thing about her too is that even when she is the final girl, she doesn't play the stereotypical final girl either. Because like Ready or Not, she was fucking sarcastic as shit. Like through the whole movie, even when she knew like what shit was going on, like they're actually trying to kill her and stuff. She was like still like making snappy comebacks and stuff and being super witty. And I was like, that's cool. That's not very often.
Exactly. She's not the cliche. She's not the cliche final girl.
Definitely. So Terror 5280 is this huge horror collective. It's been inspired by a lot of horror writers. Do you think you could touch on any maybe hills that you guys had to overcome to get this done?
Sure.
That maybe would be some good advice for any of our other listeners who are writers as well.
Absolutely. So though I was less involved in the actual production of the book, I know we had obstacles related to even just getting our availability on Amazon. So on release day, we had some issues with people not being able to get it in time for Christmas. I mean, there's just all those kind of issues that confront you when you're a creator, and having to work with multiple kind of huge giant retailers that probably don't care that much. Luckily, the team, Josh is the primary driver of that, got it all taken care of. But I think it's just one of those things where anytime you're creating something, there's going to be obstacles. But as long as you have kind of, a good team that believes in it, and is going to support you, you can get it done. But certainly it's a ton of work. I mean, it's not easy. And there's a lot of competition for content right now. So, you have to convince someone why they're going to choose you as opposed to something else, right? They can go read anything. And I think there's some strategies like having big names. That's something Josh did from the start, is getting people like Stephen Graham Jones and Carter Wilson to be involved, who are bestsellers and have a lot of name recognition, but also allowing us to kind of showcase some of our more local up-and-coming talent like myself along with that, so they can also kind of help drive that forward. So that would probably be one of my biggest tips, is try and get someone kind of on board with your project that maybe has a little more clout and can drive you forward a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Have you always been a horror writer? And if so, what was that inspiration for it?
You know, I've always been a horror reader since a very young age. Like, I was definitely reading Stephen King way too young. Like, you know, 6th grade. Was probably too young to be reading Stephen King. But it's only been in the past few years that, as a writer, you know, a lot of women are encouraged to go into romance. And I just kind of determined after trying to write romance that I really don't like writing romance. It's happy and it just doesn't resonate with me. All my stories would have people start like dying, or creepy stuff would start to happen.
Yeah.
So I just decided to embrace it and just accept the fact that I'm a horror author.
Yeah.
Which still gets really weird reactions. You know, I'm actually a pretty chipper person. I'm kind of like a cheerful goth.
Yeah.
And so when people ask me what I write and I say horror, they usually don't know what to say. You know, they're like, oh, okay. It's like slowly walk away.
Well, you're on the right show, so we love it.
I know you guys understand, but there's still some, you know, weirdness out there about it.
Yeah.
Although it is becoming more mainstream, you know. I think we've seen in the last couple of years, you know, with Jordan Peele and, you know, a lot of the movie releases in the last year, that it's definitely, horror's becoming mainstream again, which is really cool to see.
Absolutely agree. So where can everybody pick up their own copy of Terror 5280? I know you mentioned Amazon, but...
Yep, it's on Amazon, it's on Barnes & Noble, indiebooks.com, and I also have links on my website. So I'm at angelasylvain.com, and Sylvain is Sylvaine. And you can also connect with me on social media through my site too. So, you know, if you love horror, I love talking about horror. I love book recommendations,
Right on.
movie recommendations. So please hit me up, you know, Twitter, Instagram. And I love to connect with horror fans. So.
Can I see the book one real quick?
Yeah.
This is great, by the way. Awesome. So you heard it there. Terror 5280. Pick it up Amazon, Barnes & Noble. Also follow denverhorror.com. Follow Angela. It's a fantastic book. It's great. We're excited to get our hands on this, start reading it as well. Thank you, Angela, so much for coming on. This has been great.
I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, I know. It's awesome just to talk to another horror fan and to talk to about your book, about all of this. It's great. So thank you again, ghouls, gals, creeps, mutants, and everyone alike for tuning in to one of our very first video episodes. Thank you again, Angela. Thank you to my co-host. And thank you to our new intern, Amaya. She's behind the camera right now. We're waving to her.
Hi. She waved back. You saw it.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now how do I turn this on?